Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
It's quite a night for President Trump. He went all the way up to Pennsylvania to talk about affordability and mocked the word, calling it once again a Democrat hoax. But he was busy on Truth Social just about a couple hours before midnight. We saw the post. "There has never been a president that has worked as hard as me," he wrote, exclamation point. "My hours are the longest and my results are among the best." But interesting, and this was a long post. You get about halfway through it and it was quite revealing. "I have done something no other president has done," he wrote, "on 3 separate occasions. The last one being recently, by taking what is known as a cognitive examination, something which few people would be able to do very well, including those working at the New York Times. And I aced," in all caps, "all 3 of them in front of large numbers," get this, "in front of large numbers of doctors and experts, most of whom I do not know." So the president of the United States is now taking on the regular. We've had 3 now in I don't know what period of time. Is that in the last 10 months? With a battery of doctors he doesn't know watching him? We'll just park that because I feel like we need to hear more about it. We heard a lot more about tariffs last night because you can't have one story without the other when it comes to affordability. And the president made it pretty clear to the people watching in Pennsylvania that if you're not on board with the tariffs, well, there's probably something wrong with you. Listen.
"I took a lot of heat. I got up early on. I said my favorite is turning out, tariffs are bringing us hundreds of billions of dollars. I just helped our farmers out. It's amazing. It's the smart people understand it. Other people are starting to learn, but the smart people really understand it."
The smart people are starting to understand it. Let's see if Christopher Smart sees it that way. He's the founder, managing partner at Arbroath Group, former special assistant to the president, National Economic Council in the Obama administration. Great to have you back in the nation's capital, Mr. Smart.
Great to be here.
Is the president right about this? Because a lot of smart people have been questioning the impact of these tariffs and on prices specifically.
Well, we haven't taken our cognitive tests yet at the Arbroath Group, and I'm not sure whether you've done that yet at Bloomberg.
Do we have to do that, James? I didn't get one here.
Most economists, I think, will tell you that the tariffs that have been put in place have yet to really hit. And in terms of inflation numbers, a lot of the things that are showing up on store shelves today got on the boats before the tariffs.
Is that why
it's
front running we were just talking about with Stuart Paul?
I think there's some of that going on, and then we'll see a little bit more of that coming in next year. Mm-hmm. I think those will be really reflected in the inflation numbers once we start getting inflation numbers again, because of course with the government shutdown we had that lag. Yeah. But I think that's going to be a headwind for a lot of consumers next year, and that's going to make his case about affordability maybe a little harder to make. I mean, it doesn't really matter. Economists and investors look at the numbers and say, well, things are getting better. But if you don't feel like it's getting better for a politician, I'm not sure that translates into the votes you're hoping for.
Right. That's the political side of things. But you're telling me that it's not about to get better. It's probably about to get worse. Combination of front running and companies. You tell me. We're hearing from the likes of Walmart and others to say that we can't absorb this forever, that at some point we will start passing this on in different ways. Is that what you're waiting for? And why did it take so long?
Well, I think that's right. I mean, on the other side of things, we don't expect tariffs to go much higher from here. It's really a question of the confusion of where things settle down. And so
hence the argument about the one-time price adjustment we hear from Scott Bessent.
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. And that's why I think people sort of expect there will be a one-time increase. The problem is when it starts feeding into inflation expectations, and when people aren't sure that these tariffs are here to stay or whether there might be some adjustments along the way, they have to start pricing in the potential for more coming along in their supply chains. At the same time, you've got the suppliers, the from abroad, looking for other markets to sell into where they may face fewer tariff barriers. And that's going to throw things off as well in terms of the price and the balance of supply and demand. And then on top of that, with the immigration crackdown, you've got a labor supply that may be more contracted. And that will probably feed through into wage increases next year. So I think there's a lot for the president to look at, and of course the Fed.
Spiral, if you consider the wage.
Well, it's certainly another wave of things. Whether it gets out of hand beyond that or not, it's certainly not. It's an inflation fuel rather than a.
Well, so if you're Jay Powell, you're still pulling your hair out. Maybe some folks thought around Liberation Day this would be settled. A lot of it is not, which you have already established. So I guess a quarter points in the books today tell me if you see it differently, but there's still great uncertainty about what happens after this last meeting of the year.
I think there's a lot of uncertainty. I think that is the problem for, Jay Powell is probably circling that date in May when he can go on to whatever he comes off next, and maybe he decides to stay or maybe he doesn't as a member of the committee. But I think these are the easy cuts, right? When we came from 9% down to 3% in terms of headline inflation, to keep Fed funds rates at 5 or 4 seems a little high. But I think now as you get closer with the cut today to 3% inflation, and we're sort of below 3% right now, but if these tariffs do come through next year, if we have a spike in oil prices or other commodity prices next year, and we have pretty resilient consumer demand, which I think most people are penciling in because of potential for tax cuts, because of other benefits in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that takes effect at the beginning of the year. So I think it's going to be a much trickier path for the Fed to look at 3-ish inflation and say, gosh, the closer we get to that, we certainly don't want to go below 3% if inflation is persistent there.
Right. Jay Powell's pretty worried about the job market right now, and I know that's another big question mark going into next year. He's got to stand in front of a room with the likes of Michael McKee and everyone to answer questions about all this stuff today, with less data to work with than maybe he's ever had, at least recent data going into one of these meetings. Could this be a short news conference? What could he possibly say?
Well, I think he's got a problem to fill time because, as you say, the data is not there. But there is a lot of non-governmental data that we've all been piecing together.
We can chew on the beige book and ADP all day long, but I also wonder about the political layers that are being added on top of the Fed here. The president's doing his final interviews apparently as we speak with this meeting taking place. It's been widely reported by Bloomberg that Kevin Hassett is at the top of the list here. Is there such a thing as a lame duck Fed chair?
Well, I think it's always difficult in the end of any Fed chair's term.
I'm just causing trouble now.
But I think it is, it's a difficult time for investors to look at. I think, most investors are still looking at those headline inflation numbers and those headline growth numbers. The Fed drama in the background is on their minds, but I don't think it's at the top of the list right now. And so, again, it's more a question of what happens when the next Fed chair takes charge. How much do they trust when they get close to that 3% number? How dovish is the new Fed going to be? How effective will the new Fed chair be in bringing the committee around? Because it's not just the one vote that matters. It's being able to steer the committee in the right direction.
Sure. What are you hearing about the culture inside the Fed when they go behind closed doors for a 2-day meeting? Is this the group of survivors? We're all under fire here out there. We've got something in common. Or are there factions like the cafeteria in grade school where Stephen Myron doesn't even have a table to sit at?
Well, I'm not sure it's quite like grade school cafeteria, but it is very new, I think, for a Fed to look so divided. And that's one of the things that we'll be looking at today is the dot plot to see how much dispersion there is among the forecasts of the new members. And the more there is a differentiated view of the way the economy works, Stephen Myron has a very different view of what R-star, what the natural inflation rate is, what the natural interest rate is, from a lot of the other mainstream economists. And I think that's going to be the beginning of a pretty fierce debate going forward.
What are people in the cocktail circuit, what are economists saying about Kevin Hassett? Because this is a man who had a lot of respect. He was an economic advisor on the McCain campaign. He's worked in multiple administrations. But he's taken on a slightly different role in the public sphere, essentially finding himself on cable news every day defending the president. And he's gone to great lengths to defend the president's economic policies. Will he be seen as a political animal if he gets the job?
Well, first of all, thank you for thinking that I spent a lot of time on the cocktail circuit.
I know better.
But I think he's in a box. I mean, he is a capable economist. He has done a lot of work over the years. But no matter what he does, it's going to be hard for him to differentiate himself from this role as being a partisan advocate for the president's policies to being a neutral judge of what the appropriate interest rates are going to be.
Is the market hoping for a surprise on this then?
Well, again, it sort of depends on what the numbers look like. Yeah. You know, there's a viable case where inflation will drift lower from here, and so a few more rate cuts will make sense, and the market will accept that, and things will be fine. But I think again, when push comes to shove, and you've got the president making social media posts at night and the Fed meeting the next day, how that new Fed chair balances those is going to be very difficult.
Wouldn't want that job. The question is, because of course it's one voice in a room of many expert voices, the question that we keep hearing come up on this program, Christopher, is whether he can lead to consensus. Do you think he can?
Well, we'll see. I think he's got to be able to do that. And again, I think the problem is he comes from a few of his more recent roles as being very partisan, supporting the president, supporting the Republican agenda as it is today, and stepping out of that to become more balanced in his judgment. I think time will tell. I think it'll take some work on his part to do that, both with his Fed colleagues, but also with the market audience.
It's amazing how much we still don't know about what form this Fed will take in the months ahead.
Absolutely.
Christopher Smart, our Broth Group, thank you so much. It's great to see you back in the nation's capital. I was up in your fair city last weekend, the great city of Boston. It's a special time of year up there, and I wish you happy holidays. I hope it's beautiful the next couple of weeks in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington. We'll assemble our political panel next, only on Bloomberg. Stay with us on Balance of Power. We'll have much more coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
The Mount Airy Resort and Casino in the Pocono Mountains was the scene of the speech last evening, the first in what we're told will be a series of campaign-style rallies, addresses to voters by the President of the United States on the issue of affordability. 90 minutes, and it was the greatest hits. He did talk about affordability. He also mocked affordability and got through a range of different issues in this period of time, talking about everything from Somalia to what he said back in 2018 about certain African nations. We'll get to that in a minute. The point is, it was a noisy speech. The president was in full campaign rally mode, and there are questions as he reminded the crowd that he didn't even want to give that speech. He only did it because Susie Wiles forced him to. There are questions about whether this is going to be effective. We talked about it coming in. Let's do it now coming out with our political panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeannie Sheehan Zaino and Rick Davis are with us. Rick is our Republican strategist, partner at Stone Court Capital. Jeannie Sheehan Zaino, remembering when Joe Biden tried some of this as our Democratic analyst and democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Hey, Jeannie, is this going better, based on what you saw last night, at least, for Donald Trump than it was for Joe Biden?
It is not, Joe. And I think, did he call her Susie Trump last night a few times as well? So Susie Wiles, hey, listen, I flub words too, but it was good. She said that he doesn't know it yet, but he's going to be out on the campaign trail for the midterm like it's 2024. And if yesterday or last night was any indication, that is not a good strategy. Not just what happened at this rally, but also what happened in Florida and in Georgia at these elections where Republicans are underperforming. So Donald Trump consistently telling people everything's good. You only need to have, he brought up again, your favorite, Joe, the dolls. You only need a couple dolls.
Right.
This is not working. This is not working. Well, and the polls show it.
He brought up the pencils as well, which we were exploring a little while ago with Stuart Paul. You don't need 37 dolls for your daughter, and you don't need all the pencils. He said only one should be enough. He twice called affordability a hoax, Rick. and then said that he's no longer allowed to use that phrase. What was the impact of this speech?
Well, it's got us talking about it. I think that was part of the strategy, was to try and change the narrative. He wasn't having a great narrative in the month of November and December. And they've been sort of off on various tangents for quite some time. And so this was at least the staff strategy of getting him out there talking about cost of living and affordability. Problem is, they didn't tell him what to say about it, obviously. I mean, I'm sure he got back to the White House and said, I said affordability 14 times. You can't call it a hoax 14 times and think you're going to get anywhere. I think message discipline is going to be a really hot issue in this White House for the next year, because clearly they've made a decision based on what he said last night that he believes he's on the ballot in 26. And if I were running a campaign right now, I wish he were, because there's no proof that without him on the ballot, these sort of new Republican voters that came in through MAGA are going to show up to vote. They are one every 4 years voters, and they've always has been, and that's not new to Trump. So when they've signed on with MAGA, what MAGA signed on to was a very difficult off-year election strategy. And so I get it. It's the strategy saying, most presidents would run away from a midterm. He's going to lean in because, without him making this about him, he can't rely on these voters to show up. And then a lot of Democrats are going to get elected, and it's going to really derail his second 2 years in office.
Rick mentions message discipline. And yes, we are talking about the speech. The president certainly got a lot of eyeballs, but I guess one of the issues might be the parts that are going viral. They're not about affordability. They're not even about tariffs. In this case, a brutal attack on the Somalian community again. He had some very long passages about immigration and veered into a lot of topics like that really were not central to the affordability message, and even confirmed reports that he had denied about the comments he made about some African and Asian nations. Let's go back to the real here.
They say, why is it we only take people from countries, right? Why can't we have some people from Norway, Sweden, just a few? Let us have a few. From Denmark, do you mind sending us a few people? Send us some nice people, do you mind? But we always take people from Somalia, places that are a disaster, right? Filthy, dirty, disgusting, ridden with crime.
Filthy, dirty, disgusting. Jeannie, back in 2018, when it had been reported that he used that term to describe African and Asian nations, he denied it, called it fake news, and reported by the enemy of the American people. He was boasting about it last night. Should we take him at his word?
This has been Donald Trump since he came down the elevator in 2016. There is nothing new here. We have it on tape over and over again. He resorts to this kind of rhetoric when he's got nothing else to offer, because he thinks he is going to be able to rile up his base and get them out to vote. But the problem is the results, at least this year, are showing something completely different. You look down at that Miami mayor's race, where he endorsed the Republican candidate who lost by double digits to the first Democrat since 1998, the first female. And what did she run on, Joe? She ran, of course, on affordability, but in particular on these ICE raids, on the treatment of immigrants. This is something we are seeing writ large across the country, as we have an ICE that is out picking up young college-age freshmen in Logan Airport and transporting them against a judge's ruling back to a country they haven't been to since they were a child. We have a report out from Amnesty International yesterday describing the conditions at Alcatraz Alley as deplorable, violations of human rights. He's taken an issue that he was okay on and doing pretty well on, and he has turned it around. And why? Because of his treatment. And this rhetoric is another reminder of his treatment of immigrants and migrants to this country, which most people in the moderate and independents don't find particularly appealing, and which is costing Republicans elections like we saw in Miami yesterday.
How are you reading this Miami race, Rick? Eileen Higgins, the first Democratic mayor in nearly 30 years, is a heck of a headline. 59%, according to the unofficial results. Emilio Gonzalez had about 40%. He was supported by Trump and DeSantis. Is there a message here, or is this a one-off?
It's a little bit of a canary in the coal mine. This should have been a no-brainer. Republican control of Florida has become a standard, right? Democrats barely even want to run there anymore. And to see something like this happen in the municipality, look, it's a ceremonial at best mayor's race. It's not Dade County, right? And so, but the Republican was a Cuban. That should have ensured victory on its own just from the demographics. Cuban community tends to be monolithic in their voting patterns, and there are a lot of them in this jurisdiction. I think it's a wake-up call. I don't think it compares to what we saw last November, where Democrats swept state houses and in two important electoral states. I think that's the message Republicans need to be understanding, but this certainly is consistent with that, and that is we're not getting our votes out. People aren't happy with what we're doing. I don't think this was an immigration vote. She ran on, the winner Democrat ran on corruption and cutting red tape so that we can have more real estate development in the city. I mean, I don't buy that that's the narrative, that this anti-immigration narrative is played out in this race. Maybe others for sure, but not this one.
Are we too quick to try to turn every race into a bellwether here, Jeannie? We've got some time before the midterms.
Some time to go. You can't read too much into any single one, but if you look at the totality of the races we have seen, both the specials and the off-year elections this year, they have been all moving into the Democratic side. Even those that Democrats have lost, they have been much too close for comfort. And, I disagree with Rick. You look at her messaging. She was very, very much focused on the ICE raids. And you look at that, and that tells you something. He is not, and Republicans are not just vulnerable on the economy, where they are very vulnerable. They are also vulnerable on what has been his go-to issue, which is immigration. And people are seeing their neighbors treated in a deplorable way. It has been a consistent messaging on the Democratic side. You look at the New York City Democratic races coming up, that's what they're messaging on. It's across the country, and it is registering with independents, moderates, and Democrats in a way that this was always a winning message for him, an issue for him. It is not anymore with the overreach of ICE.
I've got to ask you both, because we're walking up on a Fed decision here. We've been talking about affordability for the most part over the course of this hour. Rick, we get a 1/4 point cut, it looks like, today. Do you expect anything that will follow, or market's going to be disappointed?
I can't tell what the market reaction to this will be. It's everything I've listened to on Bloomberg this morning indicates it's kind of baked into the equation. But what I would hope would happen is the president and his economic advisors will go out and say, see, we told you so. We got it. We're cutting those rates. And this is a huge success for the Trump administration. And it's going to bring down cost of housing and other things that are credit sensitive. And I just wish they'd make it a positive instead of saying, it should have been more, right? I mean, part of the imagery around people feeling comfortable about the economy is that some of what you're doing in the first year of office is actually having an impact. The White House should take a victory lap today if the rates get cut.
Interesting. Jeannie, we only have 30 seconds. Elizabeth Warren's going to say it's time to keep cutting after this, right? How about you?
Yeah, maybe. I am very excited to see what the Fed does today, Joe, but I'm most excited to hear you with Gene Simmons coming up. I have to say that kiss has been running through my head. It's going to be great. That is a great song.
You and I both, since the Kennedy Center honors on Sunday night. Guys, he's in the building. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano and Gene Simmons on the same show. This might be the pinnacle right here. I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington. This better be Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Thank you and welcome to the Wednesday edition of Balance of Power. I had to think for a minute because time has become abstract. Just take a look around and see what's happening in Washington this week. Of course, we're always here for you in the nation's capital on Bloomberg TV and radio as we try to connect the dots between Washington and Wall Street. And today, ahead of our special Fed coverage, and before we start boring down into the Fed and interest rates later on in the program, we zero in specifically on the connection between Washington and the music industry, regulation. And I'll point you no further than an op-ed in the Washington Post. The headline, Congress, I have a plea for you. It was written by Gene Simmons. Yes, that Gene Simmons, who was on stage at the Kennedy Center last weekend, the Kennedy Center Awards. You saw him in the Oval Office with Donald Trump. And you also saw him testifying on Capitol Hill yesterday before the Judiciary Committee for something called the AMFA Act. This is about music fairness, royalties. Listen to what he said.
How do we dare come in second to Russia, an alleged country led by a despot, when they do a better job of paying our king of rock and roll, and we're going to stand by and not pay today's artists and future artists? Because let's face it, our children are tomorrow's stars. You got to change this now for our children and our children's children, and I know you will. The president will sign this once all you guys respectfully get your act together and put this across the board. Let's do the right thing. God bless America.
He's talking about the American Music Fairness Act, proposed legislation that may or may not get a floor vote. But of course, with the support of the president, that would go a long way. It's got the support of Gene Simmons, and he's with us right now in studio. You spent the week in Washington. Thanks for making us part of it.
Well, it's my pleasure. And people are shocked. I'll try to encapsulate what all this is for. I know that's a big word like gymnasium. Look, I don't care what kind of music you listen to, but the American music, let's just stop at that point. American music means we created and invented the music of planet Earth. Rock and roll, blues, jazz, hip-hop, country and western, all invented and created here. Our stars are the stars of planet Earth. You can go to Africa and hear, you ain't nothing but it, no matter where you go.
Yeah.
Every Christmas, everywhere around the world, people listen to Bing Crosby, I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas, written by Irving Berlin. The astonishing, stunning, and shameful fact is that no matter who you hear on AM and FM radio, they're getting 0 pennies for the airplay. So let's play a game. Who's your favorite recording artist?
Kiss.
No, come on. Somebody from the past,
Why can't we go with
future.
that? All right, Jimi Hendrix.
Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix has never in his entire career or now ever gotten paid a single penny when his music is played on AM and FM radio. The stunning fact is that the Russians and some other countries actually do pay performing artists on radio, land radio, AM, FM,
right.
And Americans do not. And this has got to change and should change. Hey, look, I make a living, and people of my age and who've climbed the mountain, clawed and scratched their way to the top, were blessed by the American dream because it is alive, and I'm living proof of it. So I make a living. But the new artists, every penny counts, and the fact that they can be played on radio and not even make 1 penny for their performance is criminal.
So this is surprising to a lot of people. We're on the radio right now. You see that big radio mic in front of you there. It's such a good radio show, Gene. They put it on TV. And I've been knocking around the radio business for a minute. We hear about BMI and ASCAP fees. Has this always been the case, or was it simply an exchange? You play my music for exposure, for publicity, and I sell tickets and I sell albums, and that's now out of balance. Is that what happened?
Artists are not interested in negotiating how their careers are built.
Understood.
Radio needs
Where did the ASCAP BMI fees go?
ASCAP and BMI specifically relates to writers and publishers, which doesn't affect the masses whatsoever.
So is this radio's fault or your contract with the record company? How come the middleman isn't giving you money?
Nothing to do with the record company, because they make money when they sell records, and writers and producers. This is the actual recording artist. You like Elvis, you like Sinatra. When you hear that song on the radio, the people we tune in for actually never get paid.
Amazing.
Everybody else gets paid, the writers and the publishers and the advertising dollars. Radio last year made $14 billion. You know how much of that went to the Sinatra estate or Tame Impala or all the new bands?
I think I'm getting
zero.
Yeah. Okay, that's in contrast to satellite radio,
but
digital
we're
platforms.
Not talking about
no,
that.
I know, but I just want to square that you're suggesting the radio industry is behind the times because all of these other platforms
I'm not suggesting anything.
musicians.
I'm stating fact that AM, FM radio is, well, I want to use language that doesn't get anybody legal involved.
Okay.
In the patois of the street, it's criminal.
Yeah.
You cannot. America is based on the premise that if you work hard, you should get paid. So everybody's getting paid. When a radio station, AM and FM broadcasts, the executives get paid, the advertisers pay money, the billboards on the street, which use our name and likeness for free. If you use my name and likeness, otherwise, I would take your firstborn and your house. But radio is allowed to do that. They keep $14 billion. And the new artist, by the way, who's trying hard to make it, is not going to make those precious pennies to help them survive. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, my opinion is, it's criminal.
Listeners, you write in the op-ed, are more likely today to discover new music on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, TikTok. At the same time, more and more local stations have been bought up by big corporations like iHeart and Odyssey. They still play the music without paying the artists, often hits that listeners already know, in order to generate ad revenue. I've, as I mentioned, worked in radio for a while, and I've seen rampant consolidation in this business. Has that made it worse?
Well, one way or the other, whether it's consolidated
fewer
or not,
potential payers
the
now.
result is the same. A truck runs you over, and the guy comes out and says, "I'm sorry I ran you over. I didn't mean to do it," or "I don't like you. I ran you over." What's the difference? You've been run over. So the question is an interesting dialectic, another big word like gymnasium. The result is nothing's changed. Okay. The artists are not getting paid. That, I mean, especially our children and our children's children are going to be the next generation superstars after they climb their way to the top and fight for it. What do they have forward to look? What do they have, looking forward? They're going to get 0 pennies when their songs are played on AM and FM radio, and that's insane.
Do you have the president's support on this? Did you talk to him about it?
I spent some time with the president alone in the Oval Office, and we talked about family. And I've known the president, proud to say, before he became a politician. But what else we talked about is a private issue.
Okay, so that wasn't about legislation, I guess.
I didn't say that, but you're leading the witness, Your Honor.
Oh, not to. Well, I wouldn't think that would be private.
Well, these are semantics, but I'm not anti-semantic.
I hope that you're not, because we wouldn't be able to do this right.
It was a little clickbait there. What I talked, I specifically said what I spoke with the president about is not for anybody else's consumption.
Okay.
Well, there is such a thing as privacy.
I completely understand. I only ask you because so many lawmakers come on the air and say, if we get a directive from the president, we can make this work. What did you hear in the committee from members? Did you get a sense that there are votes on this?
I've heard a lot of support.
Yeah.
I met privately with Senator Marsha Blackman and Mr. Schiff. Both sides of the aisle seem, let's just say, as soon as Congress gets their act together, the president will sign this. I'm convinced of it, my personal opinion.
Well, our audience should know, and you're talking to the business community right now, that you are no stranger to big business and some pretty shrewd moves. It was a Bloomberg report when you sold your publishing rights last year. Pop House Entertainment, $300 million.
It's not entirely accurate, so just here to correct it for the record.
Please.
An entity called Pop House, a futuristic company out of Sweden, came and bought Kiss, the underlying rights, the makeup, logos, as well as the writing publishing, for a respectable sum, enough to buy Rhode Island. I give you a pregnant pause so that it sinks in. But the future looks even more gargantuan than the past. We are in the middle of the first motion picture to be directed by McGee. There's an awful lot of stuff that I can't talk about because nobody wants to find out where they're going to get for Christmas in July.
Fair enough.
There's an enormous commitment by Pop House in the future of Kiss, and this is just the beginning. When you look at a caterpillar and you say, well, that's the end of its life, no. You're short-sighted. You don't understand that it's going into a cocoon, which is where we are now, and we're going to come out and defy gravity with beautiful wings and soar to the heavens.
Very poetic.
I am kind of a big deal.
I've heard that, and a poet.
I was a fan, actually, of Bloomberg when he was mayor. Met the gentleman, and he struck me as a powerful and attractive man.
Well, I can only agree with that.
And I loved his algorithm that made him rich and fit. But that's another story.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've got the terminal right here. I'm sure there's a disclaimer I'm supposed to read somewhere, but with everything you just described, you just outlined the future of the music business. Why are you chasing down the old format?
Well, look, the old formats, if they worked and they were justified, should and would continue.
Yeah.
But tell me what your retort is, even though I know you're not retorted. How do you validate our stars, the people who fought their way to the top, never getting a cent for radio airplay? How do you validate that while radio is making $14 billion? Again, I'm not demonizing them. It bears noting we need each other, but somewhere between paying artists $0 and $14 billion, there should be remember the name of the act is fairness.
Yes, right.
American Music Fairness Act. You should let me talk more. I can increase more people will watch this instead of SpongeBob SquarePants. Come on.
I believe that. That's why you're here. Nobody gets this much time, Gene Simmons. Okay, so you've said a lot. Well, we consider the future of the music business. Do you worry about AI regulation? Do you worry about these FACO bans coming up? Speaking of algorithms, and by the way, Mike Bloomberg is not only the boss here, but founder, chairman, Bloomberg LP.
That's right.
AI is a worry for you or not?
AI is a concern if left unregulated. Anything, beautiful horse that you just bring in, if it runs wild, you've got to have some parameters that we control instead of AI. Right now, there's a country in Western Star that's got a #1 record of sorts on some chart, doesn't actually exist.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
Well, let me just go. The major problem here, potentially, hypothetically, and otherwise, is that if states have the right, and this has to be settled right away, the government must get a federal law that encompasses all of AI to get some sanity out of this, because if you can do AI legally in Delaware, where you have all your companies, so you don't pay, so you pay less taxes, because you're a very bright man besides being good looking. Why should they want to do real music and real art in New York when they can just go to Delaware and do AI? No, you need a federal law that encompasses the entire country. And I would highly recommend, and I would hope the entire planet really gets together. It's an issue for the UN to get a world body to accept it, because it's going to happen to the same thing that happened to the unions in America. You charge too much here, so we'll do business in China. No, you want to address the AI issue worldwide so we can control what the rules are, the comings and the going, and what's the income stream, who owns the IP, who's the owner of the trademark ad info. And I'd like to announce that I'm running for...
If you were a kid, you bought a guitar, you wanted to get in the music business, what would you tell them? Turn and run?
Well, I would tell anyone to do as I did, which is to say to have a fallback position, because anything that you pour your heart and soul into has a pretty good chance, and that means likely 95% or more, you will fail. And in my case, I became a sixth grade teacher and an assistant to the editor of Vogue magazine, Kate Lloyd, and the assistant to the Puerto Rican Interagency Council, Magdalena Miranda, for the Boricua community, where I did work for a government research and demonstration project ad infinitum ad nauseum. In other words, if your thing doesn't work out, what's the backdrop? I know you took ballet lessons. If this doesn't work out,
and I've lost my chops,
up and, do your thing.
I'm not keeping up with it.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool for you to be here, and I appreciate it very much. It is the American Music Fairness Act. That's what he came here to talk about. You don't need me to tell you. Gene Simmons, only here on Balance of Power. I hope you enjoy the rest of the trip in Washington. Many thanks for being with us. I'm Joe Mathieu in the nation's capital, a conversation you will only hear, especially on a Fed day, on Bloomberg TV and radio. Thanks for listening to the Balance of Power podcast. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already at Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find us live every weekday from Washington, D.C. at noontime Eastern at Bloomberg.com.